want to welcome, this is a great turnout. We've done a few of these lunch and learns, and I think you look familiar. Were a few of you here last year when I spoke? Yeah, I recognize a few faces around. So I was talking about stress last year, and then Anna Maria asked me to come and talk more about work-life balance, and I am finding that my timing is probably not so awesome because you're in the middle of budget season. Awesome, right? Like, nothing better than somebody telling you to relax and to self-soothe and to spend more time with your family when you're being worked, like crazy people putting that budget together. And I know the feeling because I'm in the same process at my office. So first of all, my prayers go out to all of you that you get through this intact and as one. And so my job today is just to hopefully just leave a message that maybe inspires you to start thinking about some things that I know to be true. And I will tell you that oftentimes the best laid plans for self-care and finding balance get all wonky. And I'm going to give you my own personal story. So my husband and I don't get to spend a lot of time together because I own a business and we've expanded to 3 locations in 3 years. That's a lot of locations each year, if you think about it. And that takes quite a bit of effort. And I do have that tendency of being a workaholic. I'm not proud of it. We should have an AA meeting for, recovering workaholics because it really can be devastating to your health, just like any other kind of addiction, quite honestly, if we're being honest about it. We all get something by doing this crazy work thing that we desire. It really makes us feel good. It helps us find value. So last week, well, actually 6 months ago, my husband and I decided for Columbus Day weekend, we're going to go away. We're going to go down to Duck, North Carolina in the Outer Banks. You guys know what just happened down there, right? So we're going to go down there, and we're going to invite all of our best friends, people that make us laugh, people that are fun, people that, allow us to do that thing called self-care. And we're going to enjoy the wine festival down there. They call it Ducktoberfest down there. I'm Irish, so I'm not even going to lie. That's part of my life. And, they were having a music festival, a jazz festival. It's a great weekend in the Outer Banks. If none of you have ever been there, this is a great weekend to go. It's not as crowded. The weather's usually awesome. I'm not right. I'm here to tell you that if any of you are like me, you're in good company. But we got down there, and there was some stress related to it, right? And so my husband and I just had to kind of figure out how to make the best of it. We learned that this thing that was this awful, horrific situation that was happening, that we actually made it into something really positive for us. Because guess what happens during a hurricane? You can't do much, right? And I don't do that well. And I don't know if any of you struggle with not doing anything not well. Raise your hand, right? Like, it's hard. When I teach things like meditation and all these different practices to help people learn how to be still, most people look at me like I'm crazy, and they last about 2 minutes before they're like, I can't stand this being quiet thing. So I'm here to talk to you about, even though we feel like that, when it's time to be quiet, it's still incredibly important to our overall health and wellness, okay? So I'm going to try and define the problem around this world, this society we live in, where work, more money, acquire more things, all these things that we tend to equate with success is kind of really hurting us overall. We're going to talk a little bit about the problem. And I'm going to talk to you about some real simple things to do and how we can try and combat that. And I'm not going to be giving you major revelation. I think most of you know some of these things I'm going to talk about. I think my big message is going to be how not to try and do everything at once. When we decide to get healthy, sometimes we go all in. Like, we're 100% in, and we're like, I'm going to exercise 5 days a week. I'm never eating another carb or bread. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to spend more time with my kids. I'm going to do it all. And guess what? We last about
3 days.
3 days. I was going to say 2. So 3 days. And we're exhausted. We can't keep up with everything, okay? So I like my picture. So I've got these presentations for everybody because in the quest of, trying to get off of our digital devices and stuff like that, we're not going to use the presentation because part of it's going to be talking a little bit about that, if you're wondering. So there's presentations in the middle of the table if anybody needs one.
Is this from your third office?
That's me last Wednesday, just so you know, before I left for the Outer Banks. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about what is stress, because we all experience it. And the reality is that we're experiencing it more and more and more. And I think we can all probably, if you talk to your parents, and then you talk to your parents' parents, stress has kind of changed. It's got a new face to it, doesn't it? And this thing called technology that was supposed to make things easier for us has really just complicated things quite a bit, And so stress is normal. Like, we're all supposed to experience it. Like, if any of you think that you're supposed to live in a universe where there's no stress, well then I need to wake you up from this little beautiful fantasy dream that you're in, because life's not meant to be easy, and it's not meant to be perfect, and it's not meant to be sunshine and butterflies all the time. It's meant to have some difficulties. That's how we learn, and it's really how we grow and evolve, and it's an important part of life, quite honestly. When people ask me what my job is as a therapist, I guess I should have introduced myself. You don't even know who I am. All right, let's go back. So my name is Susan McCormick. I am the owner of the Wellness Connection, and we are a full-service kind of wellness center where we really focus on prevention for wellness. So our intention is to get you to not come back to us, and that's kind of a weird business model, isn't it? Like, we like repeat customers; those are easy. We don't. We want to get people well so they don't have this dependency on us. And a lot of therapy practices can have clients that get a little dependent on them. We want to teach you wellness by looking at your emotional health, your physical well-being, and kind of your spiritual, your core self of who you are and your purpose is. We want to kind of fuel those particular pieces so that you don't need to come and have us help you solve problems, because believe it or not, all of you innately in you has the ability to solve problems. But when you're anxious and when you're overstressed and overtired and don't have good nutrition in you, you can't access all that great knowledge that you have, that wisdom. So my life kind of changed. I was a senior vice president of sales for a software company. I started my job with MCI, that old telephone company, and some of you are young enough in here to not know who they are. Those of us that have some maturity, we know who they are. I started with them and helped a company go public that was a software company, and my life kind of turned on a dime when my husband was killed in a car accident when my son was 10 weeks old. So brand new married, got pregnant right away, thought I was holding the world. I had this awesome job, awesome husband, awesome kid, and then boom, life happened. And I had to deal with it. And the thing that changed my life was therapy. And I was like, wow, I'm a really good salesperson. If I'm going to sell something, I want to sell wellness. Like, what a better way to spend my time. I want to convince people that this matters. I want to convince people to spend the time, because it can change your life. And I can promise you that. It did mine. So that informed me to become a therapist. So I do marriage and family therapy. I work with, I used to work with teenagers, but now I have a teenager. And I don't like to learn everything that's happening in the teenage world. It made me a very anxious mom. And I knew where all the drug busts were, and I knew where all the parties that I wasn't going to allow him to go to were. And my son is like, this sucks. Like, this isn't fair. And I'm like, you're right. You're supposed to learn these lessons on your own. I can't protect you from it all. So I protected myself by saying I'm not seeing teenagers. So I'm now just seeing adults and couples, and I work a lot with business people because I understand your universe quite well. So this little vision to open up a wellness center kind of was informed by my son also having ADHD and sensory processing disorder. So my hands were full as a single widowed mom, quitting her really lucrative job for a really not well-paying job, raising a kid with lots of issues. So I know a little about stress, okay? So that informed me to open this, and now with 3 locations. So it's a great story, but it also comes with a lot of not so great habits that I have that I really don't want to have you sit here and go, wow, she's done some great things. I want you to learn from all my mistakes and the things that get me in trouble and the things that I know that make me well. Okay, is that fair? So what do you guys want to get out of this? I always like finding out a little bit about what do you want from me today so I can make sure I kind of deliver, because this thing called work-life balance is wide open, wouldn't you say? Like, we could ask every one of you what that means, and you'd all give me different answers. So what are you hoping to, why did you even show up other than really good food? Like, what are you hoping to get from me today?
Stress management techniques, I think.
Okay.
Like right now, I sit up in the middle of the night solving problems in my head.
Right.
You know, and I don't think that that's probably very good.
Okay. Yeah, that's not good. Not when you're sleeping, drinking, eating, work. It's not good. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to do my best to get into as much as I can, but they gave me 1 hour. So what I will do is give you my card, and if you want to call me, and if I can give you some more details, I'll be happy to do that. Okay? Because I got a whole hour on that. So I'll do my best. Okay. Anything else? So you're yes.
When you mentioned the work-life balance, I don't know if others struggle with it, but myself, that balance, and what you're saying, is with work sometimes there is a lot of stress and a lot of pressures and a lot of deadlines that you have to meet.
Yes.
Sometimes when 5 o'clock rolls or it's time to leave the office, it's very hard to separate.
Yes.
And just say, this is my time now.
Right.
Don't worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. Don't worry about what you have scheduled. And I struggle with trying to turn that off and say, hey, this is it's my turn. It's the balance,
right?
and it's my turn. So I'm trying to learn ways. So that's
Yeah.
why I'm here.
Well, first, awesome for you to recognize that there's a time, right? There's a limit, and that we're going to spend some time talking about boundaries. Because the reality is, and if we're being honest, and so I'll stand up here and I'll be the first honest one, okay? The reason we work so hard is because we get something from it, right? We get that, way to go, attaboy, wow, you're really smart. Wow, that was really impressive what you just did. Or, I don't know what I would do without you, right? And let's face it, in our personal lives, sometimes we don't get one, right? So work often is the provider of all those kind of needs that we have, which is, we need to belong. We need intellectual stimulation. We need physical stimulation, right? We need all these things that actually make us feel well. And the reality is a lot of us get that from work. And we don't like to disappoint people, right? Like, I don't like to not feel good enough. I don't know about the rest of you, but I have this little thing inside me that sometimes tells me that who I am isn't enough, right? And so work, it provides you with lots of feedback, and lots of other places don't. So recognizing the need for that and how to get that need met elsewhere is going to be important. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So how do you guys know when you're stressed? All of you can read this little chart that looks like this. It's the third slide down, and you can actually, because it's super tiny. So the thing that you have to understand is that your body's constantly giving you feedback for why you're not doing well or when your stress is getting too much, right? So even though you can't read this, like, tell me some of the body sensations you feel when you know things aren't going so great. How does your body give you details about that?
I get some days.
Yes, that's a big one, isn't it? You know why? See, I like little tidbits of information. There are more neurotransmitters in your belly, more neurons in your belly than you have in your brain. And those are important for how you feel well, and that feels, the serotonin levels and the stress that comes from the brain, that our body is more of our kind of epicenter than our brain is. We think that everything comes from our brain, but our belly actually informs more of what's happening in our body than our heads do. So you can imagine when you put bad stuff in your belly, why it goes to the brain. There's the vagus nerve that sits on top of the stomach that sends information to the brain, and if you're putting gook in, guess what goes to the brain? That's where the fatigue comes from. That's where all these, kind of emotional mood swings that we get. Like, they're all informed by how we eat. But it's also where we feel emotion. So our gut is a really primary place where emotion is felt, right? When you get butterflies when it's good, and when you get butterflies when it's not so good, right? But it's giving you information. So stomach aches are a big one. What else? What else in the body tells you you're in trouble?
Heart palpitations.
Yeah. You guys are probably feeling it today with the little budget meetings coming up and different things, right? You can feel your heart. Like, sometimes I used to have to remind myself to breathe because I could feel it going so fast. I'm like, take a breath, Susan, right? Just getting that breath in to remind myself to just kind of relax a little bit. What else?
Scattered thoughts and I guess like unclear thinking.
Absolutely. So cognitively, we get impaired. When we're overstressed, guess what? You're not as productive. You're not as alert. You're not able to problem solve as well. Because when you're stuck in a thinking process that says, I'm not going to get it done, I'm stressed out, things are in trouble, that sends emotions into the body that aren't good, right? Anxiety, sadness, worry, all those feelings that most of us aren't attracted to. And when that happens in our right brain, what happens is our left brain kind of shuts down. Our left brain goes, oh, right brain, you're scary. So I'm going to shut the door that connects my left brain where problem solving, rational thinking, logic comes from. All that stuff, I'm going to shut the door because you're crazy right now. So I don't want to talk to you. And so that is why when you're all stressed or you're angry or you're super anxious, why your left brain doesn't work so good. It's also why you can give great parenting advice to friends that are struggling with pain in the ass kids. But when they're your pain in the ass, you're like, oh, you get stuck because there's an emotional attachment, right? Does that make sense? So it's why we're much better at problem solving other people's problems than our own, because our own it freaks us out a little bit. Okay? So I just want you to know there's lots of things. There's emotions, there's behavior, there's all these things telling you that you're in trouble. Okay? So we're going to go on to the next slide. So what does that basically mean? So a lot of us ignore it. So our bodies, and just so you know, your bodies are going to know that you're in trouble before your brain knows it. So it's not like you're going to say, oh, I think I'm stressed. Let me do something about it, right? Usually by the time your brain knows that, it's too late. Have you heard the analogy of that slippery slope that you can go down when you're super stressed out? When you've made the cognitive, realization that you're in trouble, it's too late. It's very hard to backtrack once your mind knows, but your body knows before your brain knows. So when you start getting that bellyache, sometimes you're like, I'm fine, what's the problem? I can handle this, right? You start telling yourself it's okay, you start being a little dismissive, then you're in trouble. So trust your body before you trust your brain. So whenever there's an argument over, well, my body's telling me I'm stressed out, but I'm thinking I'm fine and I can actually get it all done, trust your body first, okay? So when you ignore it, what we do know is that almost all the major diseases that we're dealing with today is based on stress. You can read any research that's coming out there. You want to talk about diabetes, you want to talk about cancer, you want to talk about heart disease, all of these things are informed through stress, right? So if we as a society don't start having a real conversation about how to decrease that instead of increasing it, do you notice we keep going in the wrong direction with stress instead of really taking a hard look at how we're going to start decreasing stress? The reality is if you have inherent issues within your family, genetics, for dispositions for certain disorders, if you don't manage stress, there's a direct link between those two things, okay? We also know it leads to fatigue, and when we're fatigued, we don't work as well. We also know that it gets in the way of your ability to spend time with your family and friends, right? When you're super stressed, like the last thing I want to do when I come home from a stressed day is go home and like call up a bunch of friends and hang, like I'm exhausted. And I talk to people all day for a living, so I'm like, I won't talk to anybody when I go home. It just makes me want to kind of shut down, right? So we start missing things, like I might miss my son's, soccer game because I've got this meeting that I have to go do. We start missing out and it makes us feel bad. It also, the other thing that I have to let you know, and this might speak to your point a little bit, is the more that we send the message at work that we can handle it and we got it and I'm going to be your guy, guess what? You're going to be the one who gets all that responsibility. So owners of businesses and managers of businesses are really good at finding out who are my key players. And then they know when they need something done, guess who's the first person they go to, right? So boundaries are going to be super important to understand. And let's just face it, the work-life balance is going to shift over time. When you're single and you've got no kids, it's easier, right? When you have newborns and young children, it's super hard. When you get kids that are in high school and launching off to college, it becomes a little bit different, right? So this work-life balance, it has to ebb and flow. It's not like what you did when you were 32 is going to work when you're 52, or what you did when you were 28 is going to work when you're 35, right? So some people, they're like, well, my regimen is, this is my regimen. I work out for 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. Those are the people in the 20s, by the way. I'm gonna eat healthy and I'm only going to drink 3 times a week. Whatever those are, but they're going to change, right? So it's really important for every once in a while. I like to take it once a year where I sit and say, what am I going to do to kind of allow myself to be better this year? What do I need more balance in? Because maybe last year I spent a whole lot of energy in my son because he was really struggling, and I kind of pulled back in my friendships, my social kind of connections. So this year I'm like, well, I'm not going to ignore my son, but I'm going to start trying to get a little bit more balance, with my friend connections because I have to spend so much time here. So it's just kind of evaluating on an ongoing basis, where are you feeling deprived? Where are you feeling a little empty? How are you going to fill it? Okay, so the other thing I notice with people that are overworked and not well balanced is that they've lost their sense of self, right? Anybody I don't meet many people in my therapy office who's not like, I don't know who I am anymore. Does anybody feel that way? Yeah, it's kind of hard. Or you're shaking your head, but it's kind of scary to raise your hand, right? That's kind of scary to say that who am I? Like, man, when I was 28, I was going to climb, Kilimanjaro. I was going to, be the best mom, and I wasn't going to miss, and I was going to make birthday cakes that looked like teddy bears. I was going to be that kind of mom, and somehow, where did I go in this process? And that really comes from a place of not self-caring. Like, if you really think about it, right? Because as you get more responsibility at work and with family and all these things, like, so much of your energy is going out, and this is not a male-female discussion anymore. This is, we're all participating in raising a family now. And we're all participating and contributing to our homes from a financial perspective. And so it's kind of tricky, on how that works. So a big part of what we're doing is making sure that you're creating space and time for self. And that word selfish often relays this really negative connotation, right? It's bad, and you shouldn't be selfish, and you should be selfless, and you should be thinking of others all the time. And it just doesn't work. It's okay to be selfless sometimes, right? That's what volunteering is all about, but it's not good to be all the time, Because if you are, there's no time for self. And when you're not well, the people around you aren't going to be well. You know, right? When you're not well, you tend to be short, you might be curt, you might be a little sassy, you might cuss a little bit. Maybe just in my house, but that's what, I always know by my temperament, whether I'm in self-care mode or I'm off the charts, right? You guys probably know the same. So I'm wondering if one of you would be brave enough to describe for me an ideal day. So if you were doing a good job at work-life balance, someone please be brave because it gets really quiet. And tell me, what would an ideal day look like if you truly were immersed in work-life balance? But you start talking about the ideal day and it's trying to get all these things done in one day, and it's almost like you got to get as much as you can because you're probably not going to get it again the next day. And I'm not just talking about sex, I'm talking about all the other stuff too. But you're not going to get it all in, right? So there's this thing of just having to grab as much as you can and get it all done, and that just doesn't work either, okay? So most of us, when you look at your ideal day, there's too much in it, right? So my job is to try and not do too much too little and not to wait too long to actually get it started. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. Okay, so let's talk about why being idle is tough. So, my job is to try and teach people how to be less busy, and so to do that, I've got to kind of help people understand about why you struggle with being idle. So let's be honest about that. So why do you guys struggle with doing nothing? Like what thoughts come to mind when you think about sitting at home?
Yeah,
Guilty.
Everyone else doing this or cleaning up.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
Oh my
such
God,
a
I
or
have
loser.
reading my book.
Yeah, how am I going to get it all done? Yeah, right? But a lot of it comes from for some reason, this thing of being busy is like a badge of honor, right? Don't you feel like, I did this weekend and I did this weekend and I did this? Like I came into work this week and I was like, I've got 4 presentations to do this week. And I was just like, and I realized that I felt kind of like, look at me, I got 4, and I'm like, how sad is that? I've got 4 presentations, big presentations to do this week that I've got to be prepared for. But there's a badge of honor with being busy, right? Did you agree? Anybody disagree with that? Okay. So there's a badge of honor with being busy and having things and accomplishing things and checking off that list and letting people know what you've done, okay? So, because the opposite of that is what happens when you're not checking off lists, right? You do have those thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I'm not accomplishing what I need to, or worse yet, a lot of us think, well, at least if I'm busy, I'm trying. So all the things that are broken and not working and not maybe making me satisfied, at least if I'm trying, at least maybe those things won't continue to be so bad. But dare us not actually focus specifically on those things that might not be working to fix those things, like broken marriages, like I've been overweight for about 5 years, like that chronic hip issue that you've had that you refuse to go to the doctor about, So I just want you to know that there's a purpose of being busy. And until we all kind of seriously take a look at that and wonder, you personally, what is it in you that's kind of making you attracted to that? And how do we start creating time and energy for maybe those more vulnerable parts that aren't being cared for? I think it's going to be really hard to do what I'm talking to you about today. And some of that is done what we call through emotional health, right? Being really honest about those parts of you that don't feel good enough. There's parts of you that don't feel lovable. There's parts of you that don't feel like you're a good provider to other people, or why, you can't believe that this person who hangs out with you wants to spend time with you because I'm really not that special. And at the end of the day, everyone's going to figure out I'm fake, right? Does anybody else have those feelings? I don't talk to many people that don't have those thoughts. Okay, so it's really tending to that thing called emotional health. And how do you do that? Lots of ways. You can do that through meditation. You can do that by finding quiet time. You can do it with the professional help of a therapist. We're really good at getting underneath those things that kind of get you in the way. I'm just trying to go through this. The other thing is that we do this is that we often don't want to miss out, right? Sometimes it can be a competitive thing too. Well, if all my friends are going to Coastal Flats tonight for Evelyn's birthday party, I'm not going to miss that. There might be something really funny, or I don't know. I just feel like I should have to go. So there's a competitive nature to this as well. Okay, so so when the stress thing starts coming up, when we find that we're not able to do that thing called idle time or quiet time or kind of rebooting and repairing our body, what often happens is we lead to those really simple, quick fixes without, I don't even know. If you're not looking at your presentation, what do you think is the quick fix to this issue called stress that we have?
Wine.
Yes. Amen. Yes. Right? but numbing kind of anecdotes, right? Whether it's wine, whether it's alcohol, whether it's pornography. Sorry, we have to say it, but it's a reality of what's happening in our society. Things like over-the-counter drugs, or prescription medications. Do you know how much ADHD medication is sold? In this kind of, like 1 in 5 people is on some kind of psychiatric kind of drug. The recurrence of ADHD-like symptoms and diagnoses, I can't even tell you what's happened to it in the last 10 years. It's been off the charts. You know why a lot of people are on ADHD medication? Because they want to be able to do more. Right? So anxiety and ADHD look almost identical, just so you know, in case you're wondering. So we as therapists, we have to do a really good job at being able to decipher between anxiety and ADHD. But I can tell you there's a lot of people misdiagnosed with ADHD. Yes.
As for aside from ADHD, I know that is diagnosed heavily, but also the increased use of psychiatric drugs, do you think that would have to do with people wanting to be able to have a quick fix, or the matter of society becoming more aware of psychiatric problems?
Both. And we have a culture that is creating a very stress-induced country, world, if you really think about it.
I mean, for example, like when my mom was a kid, the idea of a child having a psychiatric issue, whether it be GAD, general anxiety disorder, or depression or anything, was unheard of and ridiculous. Whereas now, it is instead of becoming a mutation or you're a freak because you have these, it's actually normal.
Yeah.
So they're finding it's more widely prescribed because it's becoming more widely accepted.
Yes, and if you look from a nature-nurture perspective, right? Like if you just look at, when we were kids, well, I'm gonna speak for myself, I'm 48, so I'm just gonna come clean with that. So when I was a kid, I didn't have devices. I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a whatever, I didn't have any of it. So, the reality is that our bodies are intended for rest. If I were to pick the one thing that is our biggest issue in this country, and it's the one message I want you all to leave here with, is that we don't know how to be still, and we don't know how to stay connected to people. We're into short fixes as quick as possible. I mean, if you look at millennials today, do you know what the average span that they stay at a job? What would you get? 2 years. It's like 1.5 years, okay? Do you know how long my dad stayed at the FCC and the government? Yes.
Oh my God.
I stayed at MCI 10 years until Bernie Evers came in, and I was like, I can't stand you, so I have to get out of there. So when he came, I left, but that was the only reason. I would have stayed there probably forever, So we just have this, when things aren't working, what do? We detach, we avoid, we cut off, we move on, we find happiness elsewhere. We pretend like this didn't happen, but guess what? Our body never forgets it. Our body never forgets that this thing happened, and all of our emotions are stored in our bodies, and whether they come out 6 months, a year, 10 years, 35 years, 50 years later, they're still in there, right? And they're causing us a lot of problems. So that's why anxiety and depression is on the rise. We haven't learned to solve problems. We've learned to move away from them and pretend and compartmentalize like they don't exist. And we have too much. There's no downtime. So our kids, our cells are overstimulated. Whether it's by looking at our screens every day, whether it's going home and getting on Facebook, whether it's, whatever, binge watching House of Cards or whatever we do, it's like our brain is not given a rest, and it's just not meant to operate that way. And so as a result, it's freaking out. And that's where these anxiety and depression and all these disorders are coming from. That's my hypothesis. So I don't even know where I am. So what I'm trying to do, and what we do at the Wellness Connection, is we're really big at trying not to give people the quick fix. I don't like when people come in and say I'm anxious, and the doctor immediately prescribes an anti-anxiety medication. Or a mom comes in and says my son's having a really hard time focusing in class, and they write a prescription for ADHD. No, let's do this crazy thing called teaching coping strategies first, and let's see if we can get rid of these things. Let's try and take a look at your balance in life, and let's see where it's lacking, and let's start lifting a little bit the area that's not working. Okay? We're doing all these things, and let's face it, that's probably one of the things that's easiest to get rid of, right? I can get away with 6 hours. No, you can't. I can promise you, you need 8 hours. If anybody wants to argue that point with me, I've got lots of research on that one. Again, I could do a whole hour on sleep if you want me to. But we've got those needs. We've also got intellectual needs, right? Like, that's why sometimes, when you've lost your sense of self and you don't really know what you're doing other than caretaking all the time, all of us, our minds are meant to kind of be challenged, to be to be thoughtful, to have interesting discussions with people, to evolve. Like, you don't stop learning after college. Most of us got to realize that. There are things like hobbies and volunteering and different things, but intellectually being stimulated is an important part. I'm missing one. Emotional, physical, spiritual. Oh, that's the tricky one, right? So that's another one that simply gets kind of really put back in the back, because that's kind of fluff, that one. And what does it really mean anyway? And it can mean a lot to people, but what I tend to refer to it as that kind of inner light that we're all born with. We were all born and put on this earth for a reason. We all have special gifts and skills that our friends don't have and our maybe sisters don't have in different things, and we don't always recognize that light in us. And then life happens. And I kind of liken it to a lantern. If you think about it, you've got this nice new lantern that you get, and the glass is clean and you can see really brightly this light. And then over time, like, life happens and it's hard. You might have been bullied in the 4th grade, or you had a boyfriend really break your heart when you were 18, or maybe your husband cheated on you, or maybe you lost a child, to SIDS. Like serious stuff, right? And what happens is that lens tends to get cloudy, because we start to see life through different lenses. And sometimes it's really clouded when we're going through emotional stuff. But the sad thing is it's really hard to clean that lens. That stuff kind of carries with us. And learning to clean that lens to kind of honor that light in you is super important. And that might mean that, it's like I was always kind of a therapist at heart. I was a senior vice president of sales, but I did really well in sales because I connect to people. Like, I really like solving problems with people, and I was usually solving their other problems, not the, procurement stuff that I had in the thing. They just liked me, so that's why they hired me to do their work. But the reality is that when I was in college, I knew that my favorite thing to do was, like, when I had my sociology classes, my marriage and family classes, when I got to go to psychology, that was not college. That was like fun. That was like reading People magazine, like on the beach. I was like devouring it. But I was also someone who was focused on making some money. And I don't know if you know this, but therapists don't do so great financially. And so I decided to I started engineering. That's hilarious, first of all. I was aerospace engineering, Virginia Tech. And then that didn't work out, so I went to business. But what I really wanted to do was therapy. And it took a major life event 20 years later to get me to redirect to do the thing that I freaking wanted to do all along, right? So you got to honor that light in you, and that's that spiritual component. And if you're not doing something to honor that light in you, then it's going to be really hard to get to this balance thing, okay? So, and it doesn't have to be jobs, right? Some people think, oh, well, I have to switch everything, and how does that mean financially? No, it can sometimes be just, getting involved by volunteering, or it can be starting a small nonprofit, or it can be, just deciding that you want to learn about ADHD and making yourself really well equipped to handle a child that has that, right? It doesn't have to be like this major thing, but it's kind of at least knowing what it is. So if I were to ask the people in this room, do you know what the light in you is? Do you know what your special gifts are? Do you know when you lose hours of time because you just get lost in it because it's just fun? Like, do you guys know that? Raise your hand if you absolutely know what that is. Here? Okay, right? So that's the reality. That's what I deal with every day in my office. Okay, so that's when life isn't hard. When you're honoring that in you, life gets a whole lot easier, I can promise you. Because your body gets pissed off when you're not honoring what it's supposed to do. I'm going to tell you, it gets mad. So figuring that out, I think, is pretty critical. Okay. Getting close to time. Okay, so the next thing that I like to talk to people about when it comes to self-care is being really mindful about the way you think. Because this is the one thing in your life that you actually do have control over. What you don't have control over are bad events happening to you. And if you think you've got control over that, I'm standing here to say you just don't, right? So bad things can happen. What you also can't control always is how you feel, right? You surprise sometimes, like you're sitting there and you start crying, you're like, oh, why cry, right? It's like it just comes out of nowhere. So we don't always have control over our feelings. They just come to the surface and they come out and we're stuck with them. And we can't always control our behaviors, even though a lot of people would maybe contend that you can. Sometimes you can't. Like when somebody can go from 0 to 100 and they're seeing red, they don't have a lot of control over that behavior. It's not so easy. The one thing you can control is the way you think, okay? So if you're waking up every day and your thinking starts with, oh, I don't want, it's kind of like the guy to make the donuts guy, or the parrot that speaks to him when he comes back from work, that commercial. But that is the way you think. Like if you're waking up, my marriage is, I just can't live like this anymore, or I just can't take it, or this job is not fulfilling, or my best friend's driving me freaking crazy. Like, whatever that thinking is, believe it or not, if you're thinking negatively, you're going to feel negatively. When you feel negatively, you behave negatively. And it's that linear. Like, you can't have a behavior without a feeling, and you can't have a behavior without a thought. You can't have a feeling without a thought. The only thing you can control is your thinking. So a big part of what we do is work with people on how you think. And so, and you kind of know, right? You know if your glass is half empty or the glass is half full. You might not be honest with yourself about it, but you can kind of tell by how people respond to you. So if you're ever wondering whether you're a half fuller or a half empty, pay attention to people around you and you're going to know. Okay? So if you're a half empty kind of person, it's working on your thinking process, working on that cognitive process that kind of gets you into that place. Because I can promise you, and it's the simplest therapy that we do, when you start thinking better, you start doing better. So when you start taking care of yourself and you have this thing called balance, your thoughts naturally are going to go more positive, right? When you start taking care of your social needs and your intellectual needs and your physical needs and your emotional needs, right? Your thoughts are going to be different, okay? And I promise you your life is going to change. I know that for a fact too. I see it happen every day in my office, okay? So these are my observations. So when I was thinking about this and I was trying to think about how to really have a conversation other than saying, do these 10 things to have better work-life balance. Those discussions just aren't fun. They're in here, by the way, you can read them. But that's not what I wanted to kind of leave you guys with. I really wanted to talk about, what are the real observations that we need to make about this? Because work-life balance is something we've probably all heard about since we started working. True? How many of you think you're doing a good job at work-life balance? Okay, so that's awesome. So I can sit here and not awesome. So I can sit here and have this conversation, and the reality is you're not going to do it, right? Like, the reality is you're probably not going to do what I'm telling you to do, right? It's like all of us have access to all the nutritional advice that's out there. We all know what we're supposed to be eating and what we shouldn't be eating and what we should be avoiding and what we should be doing, but we don't do it, right? So that lends my other hypothesis. I got a lot of hypotheses, by the way. My other hypothesis is that most people think that if we knew better, we would do better. And I think that's a bunch of BS. I don't think that because we know better, we do better. That doesn't inform it. It's a behavior issue, right? So I'm thinking, what can I impart on these people to maybe change that behavior? Because the reality is we know we should do it, we just don't do it, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is just having an honest discussion about this issue and about how, from a society's perspective, we're really kind of broken in this area. And I can promise you, if you do better at this work-life balance, you will be more productive. You will get more done. You will get better raises because people like working with people that feel balanced, right? Do you guys know people like that? When you get around them, you're like, it's usually yoga instructors. Have you noticed? You get around yoga instructors, and you're like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. Like, that felt good, right? People are attracted to people that have that energy that's somewhat calm. But we need to have an honest debate about that. There's a little discrepancy between most jobs the ones that you're all carrying are often incompatible with being able to be present at home with a young family. Let's just face it, right? Like, these jobs, we can say, let's do it and it's easy, but it's not. The jobs that we have are not compatible with doing this work-life balance really well, okay? So, and the reality is that a lot of us, we're trying, right? We've kind of created that success is someone who is financially doing well. Like, that hasn't changed much, right? We still believe that someone who has financial success is got it all. And we think that, man, that must be so easy, right? They must be happy. They must be going to Italy and they got cool cars and boats and all that. That's making it, right? We've got to do a paradigm shift. Like, we really have to start looking at this thing that we kind of equate with success. And oftentimes we're trying to buy things that we don't need to impress people that we don't really like, and we don't even know why we're doing it, right? There's impulse buys that we do. We don't need it, but somehow in that moment it's like, oh, it feels good. Guess what? That's a self-soothing technique, believe it or not, that we're learning. The second thing I want you to think about is that even though Van Metre does an awesome job teaching you guys about wellness, like I'm going to tell you, I work with a lot of companies. Van Metre is exceptional in this, so you guys are all very lucky to work for a place like Van Metre. but most corporations aren't like that. The reality is if you're waiting for your corporation or your government, and whoever your employer is, if you're waiting for them to solve this problem of your happiness, of your fulfillment, you are just barking up the wrong tree, because they're never going to be able to fulfill it. The only person that it can come from is you. It doesn't make these people bad. It makes them competitive, right? And their job is to get as much work out of you as possible. That's just the reality. We're all trying to do more with less. And that's just not good for anybody, right? But it's our reality if we're going to stay competitive in what we're doing. So learning to set boundaries is going to be important, and that's really my key message today. And then I want us to talk about realistic goals, right? That a lot of people, we talked about when we talked about that perfect day, about getting everything done. And then the reality is a lot of people are saying, well, if I can't get it done now, when I retire, I'm going to tell you, my husband and I fell in that trap because I've been really busy for 3 years. And we keep saying, just when we retire, we keep saying that. Or where are we going to retire? And we fantasize about, being on a lake with a pontoon boat and grabbing a glass of wine at sunset and meeting all of our friends who are also like super balanced too. And we're going to just hang out and life's going to be perfect when we retire, right? So the reality is that we can't do too much too soon, and we can't wait too long, because neither of those work. Because if you wait too long, these are sad statistics, but I'm just being honest. You're going to be divorced, your kids are going to be graduated and they're going to have left the home. You're going to, your health and wellness is going to be declining, because when you retire, that happens. And you may not have any friends or any hobbies because you spent your whole time working. Like, what's the purpose, right? So it's making sure that we're kind of spacing these out and we're setting realistic goals on what this looks like, so that we don't find ourselves kind of lost when we're at true retirement age. Does that make sense? And then this moderation thing. So, and I want to talk a little bit about it because Anna Marie talked about it. So it's this moderation thing, and I want you to really start focusing on this balance thing. Go back to that little triangle and read that little print in there if you can, and I'll send the real copy to Anna Maria so you guys can read it. But really do a little assessment on how you're doing, right? Like really take a look at all these little areas and rate yourself a 0 to 10. Real simple, or 0 to 5, whatever is an easy scale for you to do. But I want you to rate yourself on how you're doing it. I want you to pay careful attention to the ones that are 0 and 1. Because if you're not tending them and if you think they're not important, they are. And I would just have you do a 30-day experiment where you maybe make that a 2, and I want you to tell me how you feel afterwards, okay? I'm absolutely convinced that when we do a better balanced approach to it, and what it doesn't mean is for, a lot of people would use the example of, I'm going to work out. Like, that's how I'm going to get fit. I'm going to eat well, and I'm going to exercise, and then I'm going to feel great. Everything's going to be fine. That's just the physical component, okay? So you might be really fit, but my intention is to try and create real happiness, right? Real fulfillment. And all these things kind of matter. So those were my observations that I wanted to share. So this next thing is, these next kind of quickies are just some of the things that I've seen in the workplace that people have been able to do to kind of really help strike this balance of work-life balance, okay? So what is the policy at Van Metre for flex time and telecommuting and things like that? Is that acceptable?
To an extent, people are able to schedule their time. Some people work 7 to 4, some people work
Okay.
1 to 5.
Oh, perfect.
And there's certain positions that are you can telecommute
Okay.
periodically.
Awesome. So what I found interesting is even at my office, somebody came to me and she was so stressed out, and she's just like, it's really hard for me not to ever be home. And I looked at her, I'm like, well, why don't you work from home a couple days? And she's like, I can do that? And I'm like, yeah, you can, but if you don't ask for it, right? If you think that if you're not in this office that you might be losing your exposure and who you're about and your connections, that's that kind of work balance thing. See what kind of policies that your office offers, and you have to ask for them. Nobody's going to be able to look at you and say, I think that you might need some days working from home. You've got to be your best advocate for yourself and communicate what your needs are. What I have found for most employers, and most people, when you have a brother who has special needs, or you have an ailing parent, or you've got whatever issue you're dealing with, maybe it's a medical issue, most people tell me, oh, I could never tell my boss that. Like, oh, they would never understand that, or that's just frowned upon in my office. So I really work with people to find their voice to go and ask for things. And what I find 9 out of 10 times is that most employers are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. What else can I do to help? People are pretty empathic at the root of who we are, right? We do need to get things done as employers, but the bottom line is we're pretty empathic people. I recognize, and I think Van Meter recognizes, healthy life, healthy, career that you have. And so, if you're stressed about that and not tending to it, you're not going to be really much value here, quite honestly, because your mind's going to be there. So making sure that you're communicating with that. I also want to really advise you guys, this is the biggest issue that I see with almost every client coming through here, that freaking phone goes everywhere with you, right? I mean, everywhere. Come on, you know it. It goes everywhere. I've heard really disgusting things. Yes, we got to learn how to turn that thing off. Like, you have to, and I want you to be watching your if any of you have teenagers, the kiddos that have the phones now, please promise me that you're gonna watch that, right? Because that's what's causing a lot of this anxiety for the kids is immediate access all the time, exposure to every move they make, everything they do, every stupid mistake they make. It is out there. But it's true for us too. And so I want you to go home and I want you to pick a few hours a night where that thing gets put away, like in a drawer, turned off, power off. Does that scare anybody when I say that? Right? Why does it scare you?
Well, then no one can get in contact with me.
Yeah. Isn't that awesome? Right? Like, is someone waiting if somebody needs an emergency, like most people will know how to get to me. They usually call my husband because I'm a really believer in this. Like my phone, any of my friends will tell you when they want to reach me, they call my husband. He's not so good at this. I am very good at this. And I think it's created a little bit of sanity. I have a lot of insanity, but I've got a little bit of sanity around this one, which means that I turn that sucker off. When I go home, it gets turned off. It does not sit in the bed next to me. That little thing that happens when the texting comes off, or even though it shakes a little bit, or maybe the light dings on, all that stuff is interrupting your REM sleep and it's bad. Get rid of the phone in your bedroom. There's lots of alarms out there that don't do that to you, okay? So there's lots of alarm clocks. Don't use your phone as your alarm clock because it's too distracting. It's gonna make you wanna go to it. And try and get back to these dinners, these things called family dinners that are super important for connection, because what our kids are lacking is that ability to look people in the eye and have a conversation. And we're lacking it too. I'm noticing a lot of families have kids that are in their bedrooms and the parents are on the fly and they're stopping by Chick-fil-A and mom's driving while she's eating and it's just not working, right? And so I'm not saying you have to do it every night, but try and at least do it twice a week maybe if you can do it. And make that time where that phone and the computers and emails are turned off. Television too, okay? Old values, but I'm telling you they work. Learn to say no, okay? So again, going back to what I said, all of us, we get a sense of value when somebody asks us to do something. We're like, I can get that done for you, right? There's something we feel, but you've got to learn to say no. Like whether it's, hey, I've got this extra project I need help with, or I also run a nonprofit. Hey, do you think we can support this family? So that sends me into a mode of having to do stuff. And sometimes I have to say I can't, or my child wants me to take him to Walmart for his project that he forgot to tell me about a week ago. And I'm like, no, I'm in my pajamas. I'm super comfortable. That's going to suck, that grade you get, right?
Wow.
Like, so it's learning to say no. This is not my problem. And a lot of us, we get a sense of relief and we feel good when we help other people solve their problems. So learn to say no, like super important, okay? Even if it's, hey, can you come in this weekend? No, it's my son's birthday, my wife needs my help, and I'm staying home. Can't do it. Is it hard for you guys to say no? Yeah, right? We've lost the art of this, and we've got to learn. I get so excited when one of my employees says no to me. I'm like, good girl. I like high five them, and I'm excited because I ask a lot because I told you I'm a workaholic. So, but I try and teach them not to be. Sadie's only been with me a month, and I'll get to her at some point when not overworking. And then fighting the guilt. I think one of you guys, the two of you, said the guilt that you feel when you say no, when you don't do it, or when you're not busy, right? So working on that part of you that tells you there's something wrong with you. I need you to change that thought, that language in your mind that says, I'm not going to feel guilty. I deserve this, right? This me taking time out for myself wears no bearing on who I am as a person and what I do. And the message that I give to everybody is you guys are not worthy because of what you do. You are worthy because of who you are. Right? I want you to really think about that. Super important. All right, you're not worthy because of what you do, and we live in a society that we value who we are, what we do, and what our kids accomplish by what they do. That the language that we need to start learning or helping people understand is that you're valuable because of who you are. You just built that way, man. Like you got that light in you, right? That you're gonna always searching for. That light in you that tells you who you are and what you're about. And no one can, even when someone upsets me and they might say something that's not nice about me, I'm like, I own who I am. I own who I am as a person, who I am as a boss, who I am as a mom, as a wife. And yeah, I can mess up sometimes and I'll own that, but no one can define who I am because I just am. I know who I am. Make sense? And then leaving work at work, that's yours, right? And so that's really hard. But this is really important for boundaries. And I have plenty of my employees that come up to me and say, hey, I have to be, on Wednesdays, I have to leave a little early because I got to get Johnny to, whatever, soccer, math, whatever, things that they have. So, making sure that you're communicating that there's certain days. I have plenty of my clients who tell their bosses, I've got to go to therapy at lunchtime every Tuesday, and I'm going to be gone for 2 hours. And in a million years, they're like, I could never tell my boss that, but they realize the boss is like, oh yeah, I go on Thursdays, so it's not like so taboo anymore, but creating some these are times in my day that you can't interrupt me, okay? I don't know where I am. Okay, there we go. We're on to the next one. So these other things you can do. So the Wellness Connection are pillars of how we do this. So when I find people that are really well, and I'm convinced I'm going to write a book someday that I'm going to travel around and find what makes people happy and fulfilled and less stressed and better balanced. And, there's certain pillars to this. And I know this to be true because we do a lot of work around this in my office. And number one is that you have to start eating better. Like this was a good meal, so I was happy to see it, right? But we as a society are really poorly fed. And we eat really crappy stuff, like stuff that's not even real food. Like there's no nutrient dense stuff in it, right? So we've got to learn to eat better. If you don't know how to do that, I have a million ways to teach you, and some of it will cost you nothing. There's plenty of information, but what I have found to really inform people to eat better is when you join a support group where there's other people going through it, that there is this social aspect of changing behavior when it comes to diet that's super powerful. We've got a bunch of stuff at our office we can help you with, but please just get better about eating. Getting enough sleep, that's okay. Get your 8 hours, not 6, not 5.5, not 7. 7 I might let you get away with, but 8 for sure. Okay? Your best part of your REM sleep are the last 2 hours. So between hour 6 and hour 8 is when your body does the most repair, and it sets your metabolism. I've had people where I've just given them an exercise of sleeping, go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time, get 8 hours, and let's see what happens. Almost everybody came in and lost 5 pounds. If you want to lose a quick 5 pounds, not you, because you've got a baby coming. But anybody else, want to lose a quick 5 pounds, right? All you got to do is just start sleeping better, because that's when your metabolism is set for the day. And stress does not do good things for your metabolism, by the way. Okay? Hydrate. Lots of water. I see lots of water. Only water offered, which is awesome here. Make sure that you're moving. And I don't even like to call it exercise because nobody likes it. But find something that you enjoy doing. Like, I don't care if it's walking your dog. Like, it can be so simple. Or if you like that hard boot camp circuit training stuff that Anna Marie is putting out there for you, or yoga, or it might just be playing with your kids. Like, don't make exercise like icky. Just go and say, I'm going to go run around the playground with my kids. Or my son's been kind of wanting to learn how to run. Maybe he and I can do this thing together, or I'll ride my bike while he runs. I don't care. But just find things that you've been wanting to do that requires movement. Even if it's to buy one of those watches, that tracks all your steps so you're aware. But we all lead very sedentary lives, and that's really hurting us. Our bodies are meant to move, and that's why we were farmers and we used to run from dinosaurs and stuff. Like, our bodies are freaking meant to move. They are not meant to sit at a desk or a TV or whatever, okay? Schedule time for fun. I can't stress this next one, volunteer, enough. I can tell you that for most people we were all built to give service. We just were. And when we do that, we feel better. And that's that selfless part that's kind of important. So we talked about how important it is to be selfish. The selfless part is super important too, right? Learning to give back. And I can tell you it's going to put things into perspective so quick for you that it's going to change your thinking. And what did I tell you about changing your thinking? Anybody? can change your life, right? It can make you feel better and behave better, right? So anything we can do for that is helpful. And then make sure you have a really good support system. This is super important in making sure that I've got a lot of single moms that I see. And so I'm like, you need to start speed dating other single moms, and you need to you've got to make friends. Like I was a single mom for 5 years before I got remarried. And it was hard. And sometimes I just want to go to the freaking grocery store without my kids lagging on me, right? So I had another girlfriend, she and her husband got divorced, and we had little ones. So I'm like, I'm dropping them tonight. I need some time. And she's like, I got it, and she'd do the same to me. And it's really important to have a support system that you can lean on. That's true at work too, so making sure that you have people to say, hey, I could really use some help with this, or I need to leave early today. Do you think you could cover this for me and maybe make these copies for me, or whatever is necessary? But making sure you've got your support system that has give and take, okay? But more importantly, and socially, having that kind of support is important. So I hope I've shared with you a little bit. I think that's it. So, any questions from you? Yes.
Near the beginning of the presentation, you talked about how when you start realizing you're stressed out and you start telling yourself it's fine.
Yeah.
So how do you differentiate between changing your thinking to be positive and changing your thinking to delude yourself?
Okay, that's a hard question. Well, are you really deluding yourself if you're changing your thinking? So tell me more about that.
I mean,
Why are
for
you
example,
deluding?
if you are stressed out and you're convincing yourself through your
Right.
thoughts that you're not.
Yeah, so
So-
that's bad, right?
Right, but it's not always cut and dry that you can tell that. So is there any way you can slow down?
So
I guess.
go back to this having a good support system, because I have really good friends that say, dude, you're off the rocker again. Like I've got some great friends, and I've got a husband who's got no problem saying, this is not working for me, right? So sometimes because we can't see ourselves in the mirror, we're not aware. You have to be really open to getting feedback from people and not scaring them when they do that, right? Like learning how to like one of the hardest things for me as an employer, I'm going to be honest, and I've talked to all my business owner friends, the hardest part is dealing with HR issues, quite honestly, right? Because it's really hard to give people feedback without them feeling like their life is crumbling and that they're never going to recover, right? I mean, we have all got, it goes back to my very first statement. I said that we are evolving creatures. We are perfectly imperfect. We were built that way. Remember that. You're all perfectly imperfect. And if you're shooting for perfection, just quit it. Just stop it. Notice it when you're doing it, because it just doesn't work. It's learning to embrace kind of those imperfections and being really honest with the people you love in your life to say, hey, I kind of do this thing, and when I do it, will you be super honest with me so I stop it? And so part of it's that, but part of it is you're going to know. So even though you're diluting your thinking, your stomach's going to be hurting, or you're going to have a tense neck, or you're going to be grinding your jaw at night when you sleep, or you're going to have these negative thoughts. Oh my gosh, I suck. I'm the worst person. I swear to God, I don't want to get anything right. Like, that thinking pattern. So I know when I'm in trouble by this really not healthy thinking pattern that I do. Okay? So it's getting real with what is in your life when you're out of balance. And that comes back to that page that says there's physical parts, there's thinking parts, there's emotional parts. It was this cute little thing, right? So your body's going to tell you, your mind's going to tell you, your emotions are going to, you're crying, oh no, I'm crying. You're drinking wine by yourself. That might be a big sign. So any of these little signs that you kind of know, but we just, in our society, we do a really good job just kind of glossing over it. Well, just was a bad night. Well, there's been a lot of bad nights lately, so maybe it's time to do something about it. Did that answer your question? Perfect. Okay. Alrighty, so tell me 3 things you walked away with that you're going to try to get this work-life balance. You just have to mention one if you're brave enough to say it. So just give me one thing you're going to try to do differently to manage this work-life balance.
I'm gonna try to put my phone down for a minute.
Yes.
Write it down. Put it down so you don't
I
forget
know,
it.
I'm so